Welcome, everyone, to our labor management training. Today's session is focused on helping general managers better understand how to strategically manage labor while maintaining strong operations, guest experience, and profitability. Labor is one of the largest controllable expenses in a restaurant, and successful labor management requires constant awareness, smart decision making, and operational discipline. Our goal today is to learn how to balance staffing, sales, and service standards to protect both the guest experience and the restaurant's financial health. One of the most important labor management principles in our operation is the 30% labor rule. The goal is for total labor expenses to remain at or below 30% of sales. To understand how to manage that properly, labor should be viewed in two categories. First, we have semi-fixed costs. These include management salaries and estimated payroll taxes. These expenses stay relatively stable week to week regardless of sales volume. Second, we have controllable costs, which are primarily hourly team wages. This is the flexible portion of the labor budget and where managers must make real-time operational decisions throughout the shift. As sales fluctuate, hourly labor must adjust accordingly to keep overall labor within target. Strong labor management is about understanding the difference between fixed and controllable costs and knowing how to manage staffing levels without negatively impacting service or guest experience. This chart shows how hourly labor targets change based on weekly sales volume while still maintaining the overall 30% labor goal. Because management salaries and payroll taxes are relatively fixed, we will use $7,500 per week to illustrate the calculation. The percentage available for hourly labor increases as sales increase. At lower sales volumes, managers must run leaner hourly labor percentages to stay within target. As sales grow, the operation gains more flexibility in staffing because the fixed costs make up a smaller percentage of total sales. The key takeaway is that labor management should always be based on current sales volume, not just schedules created earlier in the week. Strong managers continuously adjust staffing throughout the shift to balance service standards with labor efficiency. This formula helps managers determine what hourly labor percentage they should run based on projected sales while still maintaining the overall 30% labor goal. First, we calculate 30% of total sales to determine the maximum labor dollars available. Next, we subtract the semi-fixed costs. In this example, $7,500 for management salaries and payroll taxes. The remaining dollars are what's available for hourly wages. Finally, we divide those remaining hourly labor dollars by total sales to determine the hourly labor percentage target. Understanding this calculation helps managers make smarter staffing decisions throughout the week and adjust labor proactively as sales change. This example shows how difficult labor management becomes at lower sales volumes. At $30,000 in weekly sales, the semi-fixed costs, like management salaries and payroll taxes, already consume about 25% of total revenue. That leaves only 5% available for hourly labor if we want to stay within the overall 30% labor target. At this level, managers must operate extremely lean. That means relying heavily on salaried management, maintaining minimal support staffing, and scheduling only what is absolutely necessary to maintain operations and service standards. The key takeaway is that lower sales volumes require tighter labor control and much more intentional staffing decisions throughout the shift. At a mid-volume sales level of $60,000 per week, the labor picture becomes much more manageable. The semi-fixed costs of $7,500 now represent about 12.5% of sales, which leaves approximately 17.5% available for hourly labor while still staying within the overall 30% labor target. At this volume, managers have more flexibility in staffing. But labor still needs to be managed carefully and intentionally. The goal at mid-volume is to optimize staffing levels, scheduling enough team members to maintain strong service while avoiding unnecessary labor during slower periods. At a high sales volume of $100,000 per week, labor becomes much more flexible and operationally healthy. The semi-fixed costs of $7,500 now only represent about 7.5% of sales, which allows hourly labor to increase to roughly 22.5% while still staying within the overall 30% labor target. At this level, managers should be able to fully staff support positions, maintain strong coverage throughout the restaurant, and run with a complete kitchen team while still operating efficiently. The key takeaway is that higher sales volume creates more labor flexibility and allows managers to focus more on maximizing service quality and execution rather than running extremely lean. The role of a manager is not just to schedule people, it's to strategically balance labor, sales, operations, and guest experience every single day. Strong managers forecast labor based on expected sales, understand how fixed costs affect flexibility, make smart staffing adjustments during slower periods, and responsibly support the team during high volume weeks. Most importantly, great labor management always balances profitability with hospitality. The goal is not simply to cut labor. The goal is to maximize efficiency while still delivering a strong guest experience. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to go through this training, and thank you for your commitment to leading your teams and operations successfully.